Friday, just before 11 o'clock, James Brierton with you here. We are live on the Carolina Weather Group Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube. We're going to be taking your questions here about Hurricane Irma in just a second. We're just waiting for 11 o'clock on the nose East Coast time here so that our pre-scheduled window on our Facebook page will go live. We're going to see if we can bring in some group members from panelists from the Carolina Weather Group in just a few minutes. But if you are just joining us, James Brierton with you from Charlotte, North Carolina. And what we are standing by for is the 11 o'clock update from the National Hurricane Center on Hurricane Irma. It's due out any moment. Leslie, I see no sound. I'm going to double-check my settings here real fast for you as we await that 11 o'clock update because I'm not hearing myself in my ear either. But it does seem like sound might be working okay, and it might just be my own earpiece. So thank you for double-checking that and joining us at this 11 o'clock hour there, Leslie. We are waiting that update from the Hurricane Center. I believe it may just be trickling in right now. So we're going to go ahead and pop that up on your screen here in just a moment. Also, what we're going to bring you over the course of the next few minutes is about 8 o'clock Eastern. Earlier today, the governor of South Carolina updated and provided some insight on what that state is expecting in terms of evacuations along their coastline. If you've been watching on our Facebook page and on our social media platforms, you know that about yesterday afternoon, the Governor McMaster in South Carolina announced that there would be some evacuations along the coastline of South Carolina. Well, today, as we were watching that updated forecast track, it was questioned whether or not those would still go into place or not, and so they did provide that answer a little bit earlier today, and so we'll play back some of that sound for you in just a few moments. But what I want to do right now is I want to look to see if we do have that 11 o'clock forecast cone in from the National Hurricane Center. It's been taking a few minutes to come on in with each one of these updates because there are just so many people on the hurricanes.gov website that things have been bogging down a little bit and slowing down a little bit. So it's not all too surprising. But as I'm looking at some of my other monitors and some of my other screens here, I can tell you that it does look that at this 11 o'clock Eastern update hour, Hurricane Irma has been upgraded back to a Category 5. If you recall earlier, as we awoke on this Friday morning, it was downgraded to a Category 4, still a strong one, and so we are back up now to a Category 5 storm, and I'll be getting those exact numbers in from the National Hurricane Center in just a few minutes. But that means this storm, as it makes its way just north of Cuba, has winds of at least 157 miles per hour. Sustained winds of 157 miles per hour or more, and we'll have those exact numbers for you in just a moment. One of the things I think I am going to do here while we wait for these numbers to come back in is replay some of that sound for you from just a short time ago. It's the governor of South Carolina addressing some of those evacuations. I'm going to go ahead and play back some of the sound for you so that if you are watching us this evening from places along the coastline there, you know exactly what maybe you should be doing. But I'm going to go ahead and pop some of that sound up. It's going to run for about 2 or 3 minutes. The governor is going to show you a map of where areas along the South Carolina coast are still going to be evacuated because of reasons that they'll outline, but most predominantly due to things like storm surge and concerns with tidal flow and winds and such. So let me go ahead and pop you up that sound. We'll play that back from our news conference just a short time ago, and then what we're going to do is bring you that 11 o'clock update from the National Hurricane Center, and bring you all up to speed on all the happenings that are taking place there as well too. So bear with me just a moment, and we will get you the sound playback. At the same time, go ahead and line up your questions if you have questions for us on Facebook, YouTube, and Periscope as you are joining us at this hour, so we can go ahead and try to get you the answers to as many of those questions as possible. And, of course, if you do have a specific question about where you are or things that might be going on, please do let us know where you are watching from so we can try to at least answer your question or point you in the right direction so that we can tell you which agency may be answering those questions.
Evacuation of the following barrier islands located in these counties: Colleton County, Beaufort County, and Jasper County. That is the barrier islands in those three counties only. there will be no other evacuations for any counties other than these three, and that is limited to these barrier islands that I'm mentioning now. In Colleton County, it will be Edisto Beach. In Beaufort County, it will be these islands: Dolfusky, Fripp, Harbor, Hunting, and Hilton Head Islands. Those in Beaufort County. Say again: Dolfusky, Fripp Island, Harbor Island, Hunting Island, and Hilton Head Island. In Jasper County, there are two: Knowles, Knowles Island, and Tullifini Island, Tullifini. Those are the two in Jasper County. Those are the only places in which evacuation is being ordered. For the citizens outside of these areas in these three counties, that is Colleton, Beaufort, and Jasper, I encourage them to seek shelter if they have concerns for their personal safety, and always plan ahead, and now is the time to plan if you have not already done so. The storm surge. According to the latest forecast by the National Hurricane Center, the southernmost coast of South Carolina is expected to experience a storm surge from 4 to 6 feet above ground level, with the greatest chances for serious flooding occurring on Monday. This is also complicated by higher than normal tides due to the full moon and by strong tropical force winds. Lane reversal. State law enforcement officials, South Carolina Department of Transportation maintenance personnel, and the National Guard will be on hand to assist with traffic issues in these three counties. If the need for lane reversal arises in those three counties, local law enforcement officials, in coordination with state law enforcement officials, will make those decisions. Shelters will be operating in these places: the Colleton Middle School in Colleton County, that's the Colleton Middle School in Colleton County, the Ridgeland High Junior and Elementary School in Jasper County, that's one school, the Ridgeland High Junior and Elementary School in Jasper County, and in Beaufort County, Bluffton High School and the Battery Creek High School in Beaufort County. That is Bluffton High and Battery Creek High School in Beaufort County. While there are no plans to activate shelters other than these in South Carolina, we are capable of opening others if the need arises. As for health care facilities, which we've mentioned before, my executive order issued remains in effect for those counties, and that is Beaufort, Colleton, and Jasper counties. As for tolls, I have suspended tolls on the Cross Island Parkway located on Hilton Head Island. General?
Thank you, Governor. All of Team South Carolina
from your South Carolina discussing the update on evacuations that happened at about 8 o'clock Eastern time. I wanted to play you that sound so that if you do live in any of those communities, you had a little bit of an idea what was going on as we're awaiting that 11 o'clock update from the National Hurricane Center. I do apologize for the delay. We do now have that update from the National Hurricane Center. We'll go to Scotty Powell in just a moment for his thoughts on this update, but let me read you some of these numbers from the National Hurricane Center at 11 o'clock, and I should tell you that these numbers are coming from a number of things. We got buoys, we have aircraft, we have radar, we have satellite, but specifically those aircraft, that Hurricane Hunter aircraft right now flying out there through the storm as it is just north of the big island that is Cuba. We do know that at this hour, Irma is a Category 5 hurricane and is actually making a landfall on the island of Cuba here in the next little bit, and we will show that to you on satellite imagery in just a moment, and why that is so important. We'll break that down. It's about 120 miles east-southeast of the Caribbean area of Cuba and 300 miles still off the coast of Miami, Florida, and we're going to be talking a lot about Florida here in the next few minutes. Maximum sustained winds of 160 miles per hour, so by about a margin of 3 miles per hour, Irma has once again become a Category 5. Persistent movement, movement here about 13 miles per hour to the west. To the west. That is very important as we talk about this landfall on Cuba. And for those of you keeping score at home, right now a minimum central pressure of about 924 millibars. We'll show you the forecast cone and some of the latest satellite imagery here in just a second. Matter of fact, we want to try to bring this up now on our screen because the reason that this landfall is so significant and so important in Cuba is one of the factors we've been talking about so long with this storm is that the more land it interacts with, the weaker it will become. It's not a perfect formula, but the more land it interacts with, the weaker it will become because warm water is a hurricane's best friend. That is the fuel for this hurricane. And so if we start running into land that is not warm water, and it actually will create friction depending on the terrain that it is interacting with. It did come across some tropical islands over the past few days, but those are small land masses that were relatively flat. If we can get some of these Cuban islands in here, we may see a forecast that kind of breaks down the significance of Irma just a little bit. And so that's what we will be looking for, and those are things that we can keep in mind. That is some relative good news. But at the same time, we are still talking about a major hurricane that will be making a Florida impact here in the coming days. We do now have that forecast cone from the National Hurricane Center just issued here at the top of the hour, and I do apologize for the delay to pull that in from the Hurricane Center in Miami and get it back out to you, but there were just so many people trying to pull this at the same time. It's like trying to be on a crowded internet connection. So there it is, what we can see right now. And I'm also going to work to get this on the screen behind me so I can point at it and show you a lot of the things that I want to show you here, is that Hurricane Irma, as the Hurricane Center did advise, is interacting right now and going to make probably a pretty likely landfall here on the island that is Cuba. And I'm going to go ahead and superimpose my own image over this so I can show you exactly what we are talking about here. And in just a moment, we will bring in my pal Scotty Powell to get his thoughts on this as well, too. But right here is the island of Cuba, right? So this eye, and we'll show it to you on satellite, is going to come ashore here in Cuba, and you can see just how much we're going to scrape along the northern shore of Cuba. So we will watch to see exactly what the projected strength is of Irma, but notice these little M's here over the coming days. You've probably been staring at this forecast track with us over the coming days. We still have a projected path for this storm that has Irma as a major hurricane, at least a Category 3, and so we're talking about a hurricane here that's going to likely be probably along the impacts of a Category 4, and we'll look at these projected winds in here in just a little bit. But so as the storm will slide across the northern shore of Cuba over the coming days or so, we're still watching for this very significant turn right here. We've been talking about this turn to the north, this right turn that the storm will need to make in order to impact portions of Florida and the southeast United States. It has not happened yet. Remember when I was reading that update from the Hurricane Center just a few moments ago? The storm is going west. It is going due west at 16 miles per hour. So if you're watching this thinking, well, can it still curve back out to sea? We needed to make that northern turn, and we're running out of time for it to go back out to sea. That's not going to happen at this point, because even if it turns now, we're like trying to turn a big car here. It's not going to happen. This is a very big storm, so we can no longer really turn back out to sea. The question's going to become, when does it turn? Does it turn here on this line, on the outside of the margin of error here on the cone, and make a direct turn towards Miami? Or what we're seeing in this 11 o'clock update from the National Hurricane Center is that the projected path, once again, has made a step westward. So we're talking about the Florida Keys. We're talking about a possible landfall south of Tampa here in the Everglades. Scotty Powell, are you with us?
I'm here. I'm just eating, but I am here.
All right. Thank you for joining us. When you look at this 11 o'clock update, and you've been looking at these model runs with me throughout the day, are you surprised to see that yet again the National Hurricane Center has taken their cone and slid it just a little bit further to the west?
I'm going to be honest with you. It's really crazy to see how far this is going west. We don't know how far west it's going to go. It's dependent on the turn, and we've not seen that turn to the north yet. So the upper level low system that is drawing Irma in is still moving through the Midwest and should be in the south. But until until we see Irma turn, I'm just not sure how far west she's going to get. But again, still the impacts here in the Carolinas where we are, James, are going to be the same no matter how far west she gets, more the track gets at least. I still think we're going to have a bout with some winds and some heavy rain. But again, it's concerning because the residents in South Florida, at one point Miami was looking to be where Irma made landfall. Now it's looking to be on the west coast of Florida, somewhere along the Gulf. So I have yet to see the full update, just getting in from the office here, but looking at Twitter and seeing the forecast column, I was able to pull it up.
Well, let me give you another minute there, Scotty, to look over some of that data, because I know it was quite a lot to ingest, and I'm going to superimpose myself over the latest satellite loop we have, and we're going to talk about the Carolinas. This is the Carolina Weather Group, and we want to talk about those impacts that Scotty was just talking about as he comes in tonight from his emergency management office in western North Carolina, where they too are trying to figure out exactly how they're going to be serving their citizens over the coming days. But we were talking about this track, and look at the eye right here. You can see the eye spinning, and it's not turning yet. This is the island of Cuba right here in this pink-purple line, and it is actually coming ashore like the National Hurricane Center said. So what we're going to have to watch for between now, this 11 o'clock update, and then we'll get an update at 2 a.m., we'll get an update at 5 a.m., we'll get an update at 8 a.m., and the cycle will repeat itself again on those same hours. We will watch to see exactly what the National Hurricane Center does in terms of interpreting this westward movement towards the island of Cuba. If in the next few minutes Irma decides, okay, now is a good time for me to turn northward, we're going to continue to see a super intense storm because it's going to be further over water. Don't get me wrong. If this eye comes across the island of Cuba, it's not like the Irma threat's just going to disappear and we can all go back to our normal lives here. We're still talking about a very, very significant hurricane. We're just going to wait to see just how much land it interacts with, because the more land it interacts with, the more the storm will degrade, or at least not have a chance to threaten, or to strengthen. But at the same time, this is still a huge threat to any landmass, to any population it comes across. So our thoughts are with everyone who is in the line of Irma at this hour, including the folks in Cuba right now who are in for a very scary evening. I want to show you a couple other things, and Scotty, then I want to really bring you in and get your expertise on exactly what you guys in the emergency management line of work are talking about here in the Carolinas. But we have another few graphics that I will pop up onto the screen. This is a graphic from the National Hurricane Center, just updated at 11 o'clock, that shows the projected rainfall. You can still see that Florida, the southeast, including the Georgia coastline, the South Carolina coastline, we're in for a lot of rainfall here, folks, over the next coming days. So why is that significant? Well, of course, we've seen the pictures out of Houston of flooding, and while parts of the southeastern coastline will not see anything of that significant, we're still talking about a lot of water, especially if you live along the coastline, and we will talk about the storm surge threat in just a moment. But even if you live further inland, we're talking about a lot of water that's not going to have a lot of places to run off. Depending on where you live, if you live in a low-lying area, if you live in an area that doesn't drain very well, we're talking about the pooling of water. So we're going to be watching that very, very closely here, especially coupled with things like wind. So here's a graphic that shows the arrival of tropical storm force winds. This is our best estimate on when the outer reaches of Irma's winds will be approaching your area. Because remember, you're going to start to see the outer bands of rain, the outer bands of wind before or even if never the eye comes anywhere near you. So we're talking about tropical storm force winds. Those are sustained winds of 39 miles per hour or greater. Let's call it 40. And so we're going to begin to see the impacts of that by tomorrow morning in southern Florida, where we already have these hurricane warnings, these hurricane evacuations in place, and we'll watch for those to make their way northward as the storm creeps into Florida and eventually into portions of Georgia. Spaghetti models. Okay, we all love these spaghetti models, right? So what are we looking at here when we're looking at these spaghetti models? We talk about computer runs. Well, we just got a new computer run in, and it's doing this, it's doing that. These are visual representations of those individual computer models. When they are that close together, just as close as a majority of those lines are together on that forecast map, we are talking about a lot of computer models right now that are really thinking this storm is going to do the same thing. That is a consensus here, that this is going to be a major impact over portions like Key West Tampa, and into other portions of Florida. This is a little bit further west, Scotty, than where we were just 36 hours ago when we thought this was going to hook up the east coast of Florida. Now we're really looking at the west coast.
We are, and let me see if I can find this, screen share it. This was from the National Weather Service in Key West.
I know exactly what you're looking for.
I've got it here. Let me put the screen share on.
And we'll bring up Scotty's screen for you at home as you are watching the special edition of the Carolina Weather Group here on this Friday night.
You guys see? Can you see that, James?
Yes, I got you. I'm sorry. Go
okay.
ahead.
So this was tweeted out. I'm gonna say maybe 2 hours ago, 3 hours ago. James, you've been doing this as long as I have. I've never seen messaging from a National Weather Service office like this. This is basically telling everyone that is in the Key West or any of the Florida Keys, you have time to evacuate. This is real as it gets. And I've been to the Keys. I have family, or not family, I have friends that live in the Keys. They have actually evacuated. They evacuated yesterday. But this is nothing to play with. The Keys is very, it's a low elevation. So the storm surge, it could be 9 to 12 feet. So a lot of places may be underwater. Ricky Matthews, one of our panelists, earlier in the day, I seen him tweet out, some of the areas in the Keys may only be accessible by boats when this is over with. So just some strong language out of the National Weather Service in the Keys. And you were talking about those spaghetti plots. Can you guys see that?
Yeah, you're still on the screen. Go
okay,
ahead.
Cool. So let me go full screen here and get rid of this.
And I will remind you, as Scotty is bringing these up, these spaghetti models. When we were looking at this storm a week and a half ago on the Carolina Weather Group, our Wednesday show a week and a half ago, there was more of a spread, right? So when you're looking at the long term, the storm could be anywhere from here to there. Now these models are really coming together because we're getting into the short term. We're getting into the better known scenarios, and I won't get into it too much, but we have a blog up on our site right now that talks about how hurricane forecasting is like trying to decide where a car is going to be as it drives across the country days in advance. You have multiple highways you can take, and as you run into traffic, as you run into construction, if you're the driver of a car, you might detour to go a different way. So I know as a driver of a car most likely what my route is in the next hour. But do I know what my route is going to be in 6 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours? I don't know what those conditions are going to be yet. And so we get this little bit more of a spread. I could take 45. I could take 77. I could take 85. And that's exactly what hurricane forecasting is. But, Scotty, as you bring up these spaghetti models, we can see that our route here over the course of the next few days, 2 to 3 days, is pretty well determined.
It is. So there's only 3 outliers. These 3 over here. 99.9% sure those are not going to happen. But as you can see, these have all honed in now on the west coast of Florida. Half of them going through the center part of the peninsula of Florida, half of them hugging the Gulf Coast. That's going to be interesting. The longer, as James said earlier, the longer it stays out over water, the more strength that it will be able to maintain. If it travels through the center part of the peninsula of Florida, it will lose strength. But again, as you can see, even as we get out to Monday evening, Tuesday, these spaghetti models, for all instances, are really still compact. I mean, we have a few out here over the Mississippi-Alabama line, and then we have some over here in the northern Georgia area, but most of them are honing in on the northeast part of Georgia and then kind of ending up in the Nashville area. And James, something that's that I've been noticing the past 2 model runs is it seems like the steering currents may pick up what is left of Irma by mid to late week and maybe try to shoot it back here into the Carolinas. As you can see, there's some loop-de-loos is what we like to call them. They're starting to loop around. And if we extended this out for the next 7 days, you would see some of those going back across the Carolinas. In fact, this member right here is already showing that. So again, these are fairly consistent, but it is showing that it seems like we've honed in on the path now. It seems like we know where Irma's going to go. It's taken a while. James, like you said, I think it was just yesterday we were contemplating, is this still going to go on the East Coast? And now we've kind of narrowed it down to Central Florida or the Gulf Coast of Florida. The Tampa Bay area, which is right here. This kind of is concerning to me. Yeah. It's been a while since Tampa Bay has been affected by a major hurricane. Our good buddy Grant Gilmore in Tampa Bay, and he texted me earlier and said that, they were really worried in that area. So, and as you can see, a lot of the members here of the Spaghetti Plots is really focusing in on the Tampa Bay area. One thing I did want to mention, the GFS earlier today, which is right in this area, was taking the landfall over the Everglades. And if there was the best place for this hurricane to hit, it would be the Everglades, just because there's not really a population center. As you can see here, it's all just swampland. Over here is the East Coast with Miami, Homestead area, and over here is Naples. But it does seem like now that trend is starting to go back towards the west coast of Florida. So that's something we're going to have to watch for our friends in Florida. But again, the Spaghetti Plots are kind of narrowing in on, we know where Irma's going to go. It's just, when will that north turn happen, and where we can confirm these results.
Yeah, and absolutely, Scotty, and we have to watch for that turn. As I put the satellite image from this hour back up on the screen, we can see that Irma is still going west. Is that unexpected? Not entirely. We knew she was going to be going west. We're just waiting now for that turn. And as Scotty was showing you those spaghetti models a few moments ago, I will tell you, I was speaking to relatives in Florida not too long ago, telling them time is running out, but you do still have time to leave. We can see on this satellite image the outer reaches of Irma. Her outer bands of rain, her outer bands of wind are probably being seen now in southern Florida. But there are still time for you to leave, but you got to do it soon, like by the morning. Because, you're going to run into other folks on the road, and we want to get you as far north as possible. I'm going to give Scotty a moment to collect his thoughts, because I do want to come to him in a moment and pick his brain and get his expertise on the emergency management aspect of this, especially as it relates to North Carolina and South Carolina. At the top of this stream, if you were with us, we were replaying the sound from the governor of South Carolina, Henry McMaster, who was updating us on the evacuation orders that they had issued on Wednesday for communities along the coastline of South Carolina. They have since walked some of those back. So unless you live on a few specific barrier islands that he talked about, you may not have to evacuate. It's areas like Hilton Head that are surrounded by water and really close to the coastline that they're still going to evacuate. And let me show you why. I'm going to go ahead and put the cone back up behind me, if I can find the right button here, as we bring this conversation more into the Carolinas, with so many of you watching us in Carolinas. And I was watching comments as well, too. I have them off here on the right. We have Karen watching from central North Carolina in the Fort Bragg area. She's hearing that it shifted yet again, and you're right, Karen, it has shifted a little bit further west. That's been the trend over the last 24 or 36 hours, although we're not all out of the neck of the woods. I had a comment not too long ago, and I'd like to try to find it to name this person and thank them for watching. Here it is. It is Leslie. What is the possibility of any tornado spin-offs? And then she uses the hashtag Hurricane Hugo 89. Two parts there, and I've been telling folks who have been speaking with me about this too. We know, for the most part, where the rain's going to be going. We know where the wind's going to be going. Do we know exactly where this eye is going to make landfall? No. But this hurricane is hundreds of miles wide. So as we look at the spaghetti models that Scotty was just showing you, we have pretty good consensus. Do we know exactly where the eye of that storm's going to be? No, not exactly. But this storm is hundreds of miles across, so whether it's a little bit that way or a little bit this way, doesn't really matter. But what we don't know, and this is the thing I'm trying to remind folks of, because we know where that wind and the rain's going to be, we don't know where these tornadoes are going to be. These tornado threats, mainly in the top right, the northeast quadrant of the hurricane, could spin up anywhere. Will they be isolated? Yes, but they will be pretty devastating where they do hit. So I'm reminding folks that if you are going to be riding out this storm, you have food, you have water, you have your battery-operated weather AM, FM radio, because when the cell phones go down, the power goes down, and your television goes down, I want you to know whether or not there is a tornado coming your way. You will know that there's a hurricane outside. It'll have been there for hours. It'll be the tornado that you'll have 7 minutes heads up on, and I want you to know that's coming your way. So if you have not yet charged your weather radio, now is a good time. I see Scotty has something he would like to add.
Yeah, that's a good point, James. And I want to see if I can pull this graphic up for some reason. Oh, there it goes. We're talking about tornadoes. With these tropical setups, like you said, they're fairly common with tornadoes, but not all of these tornadoes could be warned. They're kind of those quick spin-ups that we see develop on these cold front lines that we have come through the Carolinas a few times a year. You know, they kind of come down and go back up before a warning is issued. That's kind of what may happen with these storms. Is there's a chance to see them, they just may not be always warned. So we always have this saying, run from the wind, run from the water, hide from the wind. And so whenever we get these winds to come in Monday afternoon and evening, it's always just best seek shelter. Like James said, listen for that weather radio, or make sure you have WEA alerts on your phones. There's various ways to get those warnings. So this is a graphic that is put up for my forecast area, which is the western North Carolina area. This is from Interstate 77 west, including the Charlotte area, Hickory, Asheville, Boone area. We're classifying this as a medium threat for tornadoes.
Monday through Wednesday, right?
Monday through Wednesday, yeah. With the time frame being Monday afternoon through early Tuesday morning, as that circulation is the closest to us. That's when we think we may see a few tornadoes. They're not going to be these big classic wedge tornadoes that you see out in the Midwest. These are going to be most likely rain wrapped because there is a lot of moisture in the area. But again, there's a medium threat of tornadoes. And if we get any sunshine or any warming on Monday, that could be enhanced a little bit. What's going to happen Monday is we're going to have kind of like a wedge set up in North Carolina. It's going to be kind of cold and cool, I guess not really cold, but cool, windy with some rain in the area. We have a high pressure to our north, and that's kind of really driving in some cooler air and precipitation. That's why even though the track of Irma is going to be passing off to our west, we're still going to be feeling those effects because of the pressure gradient from the low pressure that Irma is to the high pressure that be to our northeast. There's going to be a strong pressure gradient over the Carolinas. It's going to provide wind speeds, higher wind speeds than what you may think. That's why I hate hearing that people are kind of let me take this off because I want you to actually see my face and look me in the eyes when I'm telling you this. Just because the track is to the west doesn't mean that we're out of the woods. And I think that's been a misconception today. Everybody's saying, hey, it's going to the west, we're out of the woods, but that's just simply not true. With that pressure gradient from the high pressure to low pressure, we're going to see winds sustain 30, 40, 50 mile per hour, wind gusts 60 to 70 miles per hour, especially in the mountain locations. So we're going to see that damage in wind. We're going to see a lot of rain, 3, 5, 6 inches of rain. I'll show you those totals here in just a little bit. So you put a 40 to 50 mile per hour wind, even gust, with saturated soil, we're going to see a lot of trees come down. We're going to see some power outages. That's why you still need to be prepared for this event. Just because the cone of uncertainty doesn't include the Charlotte area or the Greensboro area or the Winston-Salem or even the Asheville area, we're still going to feel the effects of Irma. I think James has got the a model run pulled up right there.
Yeah, let me put it up on the screen for everybody else to see.
And that low pressure is right now, I think that's close to Atlanta.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the closest that we get to the actual circulation. That's some heavy rain, and James can point to those isobars, those what we call pressure gradients.
These little circles.
Anytime you see those circles really close together, that means we're going to have windy conditions. So it's just because the cone of uncertainty isn't in the Carolinas, just because of that high pressure James can point up in the Pennsylvania, New York area, it's going to be driving in some cold air as it spins clockwise. backing it up against the mountains. And then we have the low pressure with Irma. With those two pressure gradients, it's going from high to low. We're going to see some winds here in the Carolinas. That's why I'm still concerned. James is still concerned. You watch your favorite meteorologists on TV. They're still going to tell you, hey, we're still going to get some pretty bad conditions here Monday and Tuesday.
Right. Luckily for the people of the Carolinas, we are not talking about a Category 5 hurricane. We have a very devastating hurricane impacting right now the people of Cuba and the people of Florida here, impending shortly. This is just one particular run, but to use this as a consensus to talk to you about whether or not this little L right here that represents Irma, whether it is over South Carolina, whether it's over Alabama, it still has a very wide-reaching impact here. And exactly like Scotty was just talking about, we may not be right in here where it is the worst, but we are still in for a few days that are going to be very rainy, very windy, and as we were just talking about, if you're in this northeast quadrant of the storm, this is where you get a lot of those short-lived spin-up tornadoes. One of the things we have that is new, it is experimental, which means that it hasn't really been battle-tested and it's being adjusted a little bit, is a new power outage prediction map that is a joint effort between the Ohio State University, Texas A&M University, and University of Michigan. I'm going to go ahead and pop it up on your screen right now. And what this is trying to show you is the impact of this storm. And when you're looking in Florida and you see things that are red and orange, it is telling us that the percentage of customers, power customers, who are anticipated to be out of power in Florida is greater than 50%. And we're not talking about a power outage like, oh, power is out, it'll be back in an hour. We're talking about days here to get all of Florida probably back online, which is why we're telling you that you need storm supplies for more than just a day or two. We're talking a week of water, food, prescription, and enough batteries to keep your information sources operating. But even back up into places, into Georgia, you can see that we will have some power outages probably anticipated in portions of that region. You will notice in this graphic that at this hour, again, it's experimental, and it's just a guidance, we're not seeing a lot of high-reaching impacts right now in terms of power outages in North Carolina and South Carolina. If we do see a slight change in the track of the forecast, and we are still days away, I would expect to see a little bit more, if nothing else, those reasons that Scotty and I were just discussing.
Yeah, can I, James, you were talking about, I've been in meetings galore today, and we've actually been talking to the power officials here in Western North Carolina. So this map I'm getting ready to show you, I'm sorry, my forecast area is the Western Carolinas. I'm not in the Central North Carolina or even the coastal areas. We'll talk about that. I just don't have graphics that I've been able to make and can explain to you. But let me show you just from the information that we've got. And again, this is power officials telling us this. And James, you know we've dealt with this. We had a drought, a serious drought last year. That was able to weaken the tree root system. We've had a pretty wet spring and summer, so our grounds are fully saturated. It's not going to take long for weakened tree root systems and saturated grounds to get trees to come down. So let me pull up this map right here. And this is what our forecast is for power outages.
Perfect. And I think Leslie is watching on Facebook Live was asking for this map to come back up, so I'm glad we've got it here. And this is not the tornado one, but this is a power outage forecast map you guys put together.
Right. Yeah, and we'll pop the tornado one up back. I know Leslie was wanting to see it. But this is our thinking. We think it's a medium threat for the Charlotte metro area up into Greensboro, Winston-Salem, and into the foothills. Now, we do have a higher threat for power outages just because we think the winds are going to be stronger up in the mountains. And as you can see here, maybe just south of Morganton and Marion, over here towards Taylorsville and Lenoir, those are highlighted mountain ranges that are a little bit elevated rather in these lower elevation areas. So anything I believe above 2,500 feet or so elevation-wise, I think run the risk of seeing some higher amounts of power outages. Again, this is for Monday, September 11th through Wednesday, September 13th. And I also want you to think of this, James. You know, we've been talking about Harvey, right? You know, Harvey, the folks in Texas are still cleaning up from Harvey. We have big wildfires in the west. It seems like California, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, all dealing with major wildfires. There was an earthquake in Mexico last evening. So a lot of our resources are stretched. That's American Red Cross. That's your power people as well. Your linemen who come in after the storm and help pick up and restore power. So our resources are really stretched thin right now with so much that's going on weather-wise that if you do experience a power outage, it may be a few days before you get that back on because of all the resources being stretched thin. So I know James was talking about having your disaster kit ready to go, and that's the reason why.
Something while you're talking.
Yeah, that's fine. That's the reason why. While you're doing that, I'll go ahead and screen share the tornado map once again. I know we had someone that was wanting to see
Leslie
that.
is watching on Facebook Live, and thank you to everyone who is watching on Facebook Live, YouTube, and Periscope for following, liking, and joining us this evening. Scotty's got his tornado map back up.
Yeah, and for those folks who are watching, share this video. Share it out on your social media platforms. Let people come in and watch, and feel free to ask questions. That's what we're here for. We'll go for another 30 minutes or so answering all the questions that you have. But again, this is the tornado threat map. This would be for Monday afternoon through early Tuesday morning as the circulation of Irma passes by to our southwest. This is when we think that we could see some brief tornadoes that happen in the area. I can't pinpoint one place over the other. Normally when we're dealing with severe weather, you can say, hey, the Charlotte area may see a higher percentage chance of tornadoes in the mountains. But with tropical systems, landfalling tropical systems, we normally see tornadoes develop on the northeast quadrant of the tropical system. That's where the Carolinas will be on Monday and Tuesday as Irma passes by to our southwest. So there is the possibility of seeing some isolated tornadoes happen throughout this event. So again, that's the tornado map. Medium threat. I don't know if I have it pulled up or not. I think I may. Yeah, I do. Hopefully that'll switch over. This is Irma's threats. This is for Western North Carolina. We've highlighted the flash flood threat as our main concern. That's on a 4 out of 6. And tornadoes is like a 2.5 out of 6. So we're in that low to moderate thinking for tornadoes. And then also tropical storm force winds, which are less than 74 miles per hour. That is also a concern to us here in the Western North Carolina area, the Charlotte metro area. So tropical storm force winds 74 miles per hour or lower, and flash flooding are main concerns, but we can't rule out one of those isolated tornadoes.
And I think at this hour, to the best knowledge we have, what you just said about the Charlotte metro area is exactly right on. So we are talking about, and I'm going to pop the forecast cone up back onto the screen while I'm talking about this. As we bring this conversation beyond the immediate next 12, 24 hours, we're talking coming into Monday and Tuesday, we're talking about major impacts here for areas still: Charleston, South Carolina, Columbia, Greenville, Spartanburg, western mountains of North Carolina, Asheville, and Charlotte. We are probably not anymore talking about major storm impacts for areas like Raleigh. You are right now taking a breather. A couple days ago, we were debating whether or not this was going to go into Charlotte or Raleigh. Now we are debating whether or not this is going to Birmingham, Atlanta, or somewhere in the western North Carolina mountains, or eventually up into Tennessee. That could shift yet again. I'll be the first person to admit it. You all seen it. This could change yet again. But we will watch for that. I'm going to pause for just a second because I know we've gone into a lot of different things here that we've been talking about, and I do want to let folks know as we are coming up to about 1:45 James Brierton, Scotty Powell, thank you for joining us on this live Friday night edition of the Carolina Weather Group as we are tracking Hurricane Irma. We do have the 11 o'clock update from the National Hurricane Center, and that's what's been motivating our entire conversation. But at this hour, we are watching Hurricane Irma once again, a Category 5 storm making a landfall on the island of Cuba. She's about 300 miles still off the tip of Florida in Miami, and is impacting just the outer bands of her circulation there, with winds and rain just beginning to be seen in the southern tip of Florida. where in the southern tip of Florida we do have evacuations, we do have hurricane warnings, we do have storm surge warnings. Those storm surge warnings from southern Florida, Fort Myers, Miami, Key West, those have now been pushed as far north as the Brevard County line, that's on the east side of Florida, and as far north on the west side as Tampa Bay. So we are expecting, again, storm surge several feet above normal high tide for those areas. We have hurricane warnings including those same areas. So essentially, if you are anywhere in Florida, Tampa, Orlando, Melbourne South, you are right now in a hurricane warning. We have watches up for those other places, which means that a hurricane is likely. And as we look at these forecast data, this data here that is coming in at this hour, it seems very likely that we are going to have a hurricane, Scotty, that is going to impact almost every resident of Florida.
We are, and I wish I was paying attention to a show that we did a couple of weeks ago and wrote down the link. We had a great guest on, Doug Marcy with the Coastal Division, and he showed us this cool storm surge map, and I forgot to bookmark it because I was wanting to show you what the storm surge was looking like for the South Florida area. But
well, I'm not sure if it's the exact map you're talking about, but I will go ahead and pop up the map that is included on the hurricane website, which, if nothing else, will I think help demonstrate your point here. And I was just reading as well the definition of one of those storm surge warnings, and we're talking about life-threatening flooding. As I push here in on this map to southern Florida, the Fort Myers area, we're seeing, when you see red on a map, that's never a good thing. And as I scroll down a little bit further here so we can see the scale, we're talking about flooding that is greater than 9 feet above the ground. That is taller than you or I.
So yeah, basically think of it this way. When you go through a drive-through at your favorite local fast food restaurant, or maybe if you're going through the drive-through at the bank, it'll kind of give you that clearance sign, and most of the time it's 8 feet. So imagine another foot added onto that, and you standing on the ground and looking up. That's how much storm surge could be coming into the South Florida area. 9 feet above normal. That's going to do a lot of damage. That's going to wash away homes and businesses, and the main killer in any hurricane is not wind. It's water. It's storm surge. It's flooding. So thankfully, in this map that you're showing right here, James, that's the Everglades. So if we was to ever have a 9-foot storm surge, that would be an ideal location because there's not really any population centers there. But if you was to scroll up into the Naples area, which is about 15 miles up, I'm trying to think, what is that, about 6 to 9 feet of storm surge there?
We're looking at Port Charlotte and Fort Myers. Yeah, we're still looking at, impacts here, and I will scroll down just a little bit. I'm sorry, my screen is only so big as I try to make this nice and big for everyone to see. As you're looking at yellows, those are greater than 3 feet. Looking at orange, that's greater than 6 feet. So, I mean, by the time you're looking at these orange numbers, you're talking about, taller than your average adult. And, it's not just these coastal communities. I mean, of course, we're talking about barrier islands. We're talking about people who live along the coast, but we're also talking about people who live along these waterways, canals and streams. I mean, if you live in Florida and you're watching us tonight, you know what the terrain is like, and so many of you have been there, but, you are so low, the elevation is so low, and you have these natural and man-made waterways that the storm surge, it doesn't care what it is low-lying areas that is going to get pushed right up against all that wind.
Yeah, and James, this is this is a destination here. You got Sanibel Island down there. You have a lot of resorts, high-rise, a lot of condos, so there could be some significant damage to those vacation getaways that people like to go to down in that part of Florida. So this could potentially be a very devastating fact. And James, if you don't mind, since you have that pulled up, could we go up to the Savannah and Charleston area?
I think you read my mind.
Even though
this map's not really showing it, but I know exactly what you're about to say.
Yeah, even the center of Irma is going to be far away from it, but we're going to get, with low pressure, it spins counterclockwise. So maybe with James, and he's got the screen right now, that spins counterclockwise. So we're getting a fetch off the ocean that's going to be pushing into the Savannah area, into the Charleston area, and that in itself is going to create some storm surge. And in fact, I think there's a coastal flood advisory or something like that was issued for the Charleston area about an hour or so ago.
I'm going to point as Scotty is talking. Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, that's great. So that's the flow that's going to be coming in off the ocean. Yeah, that's going to be coming in off the ocean. So even though the center is going to pass well away from the Charleston, Savannah, Hilton Head area, we're still going to feel effects from that for the storm surge and just the onshore flow of wind. And that's going to be pushing that water into the inlets and the swamp areas, the intercoastal waterways. So Charleston, though, may not see the major wind impacts, so they're going to see potentially some flooding there as well. And James, is that the newest run of the GFS, or is that just something
that is the last full run? We are obviously getting in the new run, I think, right now.
Yeah, I'm getting my group chat, and I'm actually hearing that track is a little bit to the east from what the GFS is.
Let's pause for a moment. I actually don't have the ability to mute you, so I'm going to ask that you self-mute, because what I would like to do while we gather in some of that new model data that is coming in and we look at some of these social media questions is I want to replay once again. Governor Henry McMaster, governor of South Carolina, spoke earlier this evening about those evacuations along his coastal communities there, and as I get this queued up, I want to play that again because so many folks are probably wondering what's to become of those evacuation plans we heard about yesterday. Well, there have been some changes to them as the forecast has been adjusting, and so I want to let the governor show his map and talk about those once again.
Starting at 10 a.m. tomorrow, Saturday, September the 9th, 2017, I'm ordering the mandatory evacuation of the following barrier islands located in these counties: Colleton County, Beaufort County, and Jasper County. That is the barrier islands in those three counties only. There will be no other evacuations for any counties other than these three, and that is limited to these barrier islands that I'm mentioning now. In Colleton County, it will be Edisto Beach. In Beaufort County, it will be these islands: Dolfusky, Fripp, Harbor, Hunting, and Hilton Head Islands. Those in Beaufort County. Say again: Dolfusky, Fripp Island, Harbor Island, Hunting Island, and Hilton Head Island. In Jasper County, there are two: Knowles, Knowles Island, and Tullifini Island, Tullifini. Those are the two in Jasper County. Those are the only places in which evacuation is being ordered. For the citizens outside of these areas in these three counties, that is Colleton, Beaufort, and Jasper, I encourage them to seek shelter if they have concerns for their personal safety, and always plan ahead, and now is the time to plan if you have not already done so. The storm surge. According to the latest forecast by the National Hurricane Center, the southernmost coast of South Carolina is expected to experience a storm surge from 4 to 6 feet above ground level, with the greatest chances for serious flooding occurring on Monday. This is also complicated by higher than normal tides due to the full moon and by strong tropical force winds. Lane reversal. State law enforcement officials, South Carolina Department of Transportation maintenance personnel, and the National Guard will be on hand to assist with traffic issues in these three counties. If the need for lane reversal arises in those three counties, local law enforcement officials, in coordination with state law enforcement officials, will make those decisions. Shelters will be operating in these places: the Colleton Middle School in Colleton County, that's the Colleton Middle School in Colleton County, the Ridgeland High Junior and Elementary School in Jasper County, that's one school, the Ridgeland High Junior and Elementary School in Jasper County, and in Beaufort County, Bluffton High School and the Battery Creek High School in Beaufort County. That is Bluffton High and Battery Creek High School in Beaufort County. While there are no plans to activate shelters other than these in South Carolina, we are capable of opening others if the need arises. As for health care facilities, which we've mentioned before, my executive order issued remains in effect for those counties, and that is Beaufort, Colleton, and Jasper counties. As for tolls, I have suspended tolls on the Cross Island Parkway located on Hilton Head Island. General?
So there you have it. That is just replaying some sound, an update on the evacuation in South Carolina. So tomorrow morning, if you live in any of those coastal communities, mainly on barrier islands and the like, you will be asked to evacuate and at least get to higher ground. You no longer have to go some 6 counties in, like when they announced on Wednesday that everyone, essentially to the east of 95 was going to have to go inland. Now we're just talking about a lot smaller communities asking to get away from the water for the exact reason Scotty and I are talking about. We don't have a direct hurricane impact, but we're still going to have that onshore flow here, a mass amount of rain, windy conditions, and I think we're at high tide too, Scotty, so that's all going to be pushing on shore. And so we'll be watching for that. I know before we went to that sound, Scotty, we were watching for some new model data coming in, and you've been looking at that data center. What are we looking at this hour? What can we expect over the next hour or so?
Yeah, so the GFS come in, and James, can you pull it up? Or
yeah,
do you want
absolutely.
Me to?
Are you looking at it on Tropical Tidbits?
Yes, I am.
All right, I can do that, and I will.
Provided by our good buddy and guest of our show many times, Levi Cowan. So we appreciate Levi's hard work.
Let me do one really good hard refresh here. And why don't you tell us a little bit about what the GFS is as I do a refresh.
So the GFS is the American model, weather model. It's a long-term model that we look at to forecast weather. It is one of the two that we use. The European model is the other for medium to long-range forecasting. And then once we get into about a 2 or 3 day time frame, we use it still, but we also use a few short-term models. But GFS is one that we use, and so it comes in 4 times a day: midnight, 6 a.m., 12 p.m., and then 6 p.m., and then the process switches over. So this is what we would call the 0Z run. And the 0Z run and the 12Z run are the best runs to watch because it has a lot of extra stuff added to it. The National Weather Service launches weather balloons. We had a show about that. And that data is ingested to these and kind of helps out. And so this is showing is I'm going to look at it too. So, James, I'm going to go.
Why don't I make it nice and big for you as you're looking at our off-air monitor here, and I can even probably zoom this in. So we don't have all of the slides yet, but we have enough of the picture, Scotty, that I think we can focus in on what we want to be looking at here.
Yeah, so you can see the GFS has picked up on that little move to Cuba, and it is starting to pick up on the west coast of Florida. It was more central to east coast of Florida earlier today, so it is taking that west coast, but in the last 3 or 4 frames, it kind of wants to bend back to the east a little bit once it gets up into northern Florida, about right there. Can you scroll it back? I know you're doing it in motion right now.
I am. Let me try to zoom back out. I'm sorry
You're fine.
unless I'm missing something. Can I go left and I can go left and right. Thank you, Levi.
Yeah, you can.
I'm sorry. All right, cool. Now I can manually drive this.
Okay.
And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to superimpose myself over this so that I can point as you were talking.
Okay, so we're currently we're about Gainesville, Georgia, Gainesville, Florida. Right now is a 954 pressured, low pressure. As we go to the next slide, you can see.
Sorry.
Well, there's so many people.
I clicked. I wasn't supposed to click.
All right.
Driving too many things at once. There we go.
All right, so you can see now that's on the Florida-Georgia line, but I want you to look towards Savannah and Charleston. You see that fetch of moisture that's being drove in by the Atlantic Ocean? As we go through the next slide or two, I want you to watch where that fetch of moisture goes. It goes through Columbia. Look at that. I don't know what Z run that is, what time that is. Can you tell me what time that is? That is the 0Z. So that is Monday night around 7 p.m. We can see some really heavy rain developing in the Charleston and Columbia area. moving to the northwest. That'll be moving towards Greenville, South Carolina, Charlotte, even into the Asheville area. So we go to the next one. This will be about 1 to 2 a.m. in the morning. You can see some of the red, the most intense rain is dissipating, but we still have a good column of red and orange moving into the southwest North Carolina. So let me tell you why this is important. We have the Appalachian Mountains, 6,000 feet or so in elevation. And so we're going to have this strong southeast flow. And to get any type of precipitation, to get clouds, you have to have air to rise. So we're shooting in this moisture into the mountains, and it's creating this lift. And so once you get into the Asheville, Morganton, Lenoir, Marion, I'm trying to think, Forest City, Lake Lure area, it hits that mountain. It kind of gives it an extra ring. It's kind of like wringing a dish rag out to get all that water out. So that extra rain is going to be deposited over the western part of the state, over the foothills. And that is why I believe when this comes to fruition that we're going to see some flash flooding issues. And I'll show you why in just a little bit. I'll pull up a graphic here. So we go to the next one. This is about 7 a.m. As you can see, that low pressure really starts to open up. As you can see, those circles, the pressure gradients around the low pressure are not as tightly compacted. They kind of open up. And when it does that, it's kind of releasing energy. So we'll see some gusty winds off of that. And then as we go into the next slide, you can see things really start to dissipate, turn into light rain, and then Irma will finally lose its tropical characteristics, and that'll probably be the last of Irma.
I'm going to go backwards a second.
Yeah.
Because I want to show exactly what Scotty's talking about. We talked about this a little bit earlier. You see these circles here? They almost look like tree rings. The closer they are together, the stronger the winds is what you need to take away from this. And then the colors behind it are your traditional radar. Red is heavy rain, green is lighter rain, and so we're looking at, there's been a lot of comparison. There's always a lot of comparison, Scotty. Oh, is this going to be
We always
Hugo?
Like to compare storms, right?
Oh, is this going to be Hugo? It's not going to be Hugo. We're not talking about a major impact of a hurricane coming right into the Carolinas. We've also heard Matthew dropped in the past few days because of the amount of rain. I mean, this is a lot of rain right here, but with Matthew, we had the thing parked offshore and it was just pushing rain on continuously. So
that's one good thing about Irma is we're going to see Irma really progress. It's not really going to stall out. It's not going to be a fast mover. That was one thing about Hugo, which made it so unique, is we had 80, 85 mile per hour in the Charlotte area, but it just made landfall in Charleston 3 hours before that. So it was really racing through South Carolina and North Carolina. This storm's more your traditional storm. It's not really going slow. It's not really going fast, but 12 to 18 hours of really consistent precipitation and wind, and then it's going to be over with. So that's a good thing about Irma is it's going to be in and out. It's not going to be hanging around for days like Matthew was.
Or even Harvey. When you think about Texas
right.
in the past few weeks, one of the reasons that storm was so intense and so significant is because it didn't have the motion that Irma has. It's only moving at 16 miles per hour, but we'll take that. Harvey just parked. It was
right, yeah,
all.
Barely moving, yeah.
So it is just past the midnight Eastern hour. Our lower third says Friday at 11 p.m. Eastern. I suppose I should type that to now say Saturday at 12 a.m. Eastern. James Brierton, Scotty Powell with you here on the Carolina Weather Group. And thanks so much to everyone who likes and follows us on Facebook, on Twitter, and on YouTube. We appreciate the opportunity to share this very important information with you. If whether you are a longtime fan or a new one, we do welcome you in this very significant weather time. We, of course, also want to let you know that while we are here to provide this information to you, there are a lot of really smart people where you live as well, too. And so there is no competitive nature about this at all. This is life-saving weather information. So we also encourage you, especially if you live someplace where there's going to get a direct impact from this storm, to know your local meteorologist, know your news sources, and know how to receive information from your emergency managers. Because while Scotty and I and the rest of the Carolina Weather Group can sit here and talk about this satellite image for you, we can't go street level. Even if this was coming into the Carolinas, we're not going to be able to go street level. But your local meteorologists, your local emergency managers, they can do that for you. So we are very happy and grateful that you are here with us tonight. But as we all gear up for a very significant storm, I wanted to pass that along too. I see Scotty's looking up at some of his other monitors. I'm going to take a look at some of our comments that are coming in as well too. But
James, did we cover? I just now looked up. I didn't know that it had regained back to a Category 5.
We did. At the very top of the show, we talked about those sustained winds at 116 miles an hour as it heads towards Cuba there, which by my math gives it about a 3-mile-per-hour margin to be a Category 5. As I pop the satellite image back up, you can take a look at that.
Yep, I didn't see that. I was rushing in here and did not see that Irma was a Category 5. And I'm going to tell you, I wish we had Shay on, because Shay has the weather flow technology, but that you or I don't have. But that water between Cuba and the Bahamas and Florida, that is bath water. That is 86 to 90 degree water. So it would not surprise me a bit once Irma leaves the Cuban coast and starts to track towards the southern part of Florida, that we see those winds increase to 165, maybe even 170 mile per hour wind before Irma makes her final descent into Florida.
And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put the National Hurricane Center 11 o'clock update back up on your screen. This was the latest we had in about an hour ago. The next update comes at 2 a.m. Eastern, which at the rate Scotty and I are going, we'll probably still be sitting in this chair. I half kid, but, we are weather nerds, and I think Scotty and I would agree that going to bed these last few nights have been difficult, and even more so for the folks who are in the path of the storm, and also for the geeks who are staring and waiting for each and every one of these frames to come in so we can show them to you.
You know it's bad when you set your phone at like 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning, so you can wake up and just glance at the European model.
The European model?
Yeah. You look at it, and then you go back to bed, and then you wake up around 6:30 or 6 o'clock, and you want to see what the National Hurricanes put out. So
I will translate. Remember a moment ago when Scotty and I were showing you this guy here moving up, and we were talking about the GFS? Let me rewind, and I will play again. So, this is the GFS interpretation. This is the North American model. The Europeans, the Euro, also have a model, and it is due out in about an hour or so, and we will anxiously wait to see if there is a change to the forecast when that comes on out, whether or not we will see. Let me just show it to you. This is the Euro, from several hours ago now at this point, if I switch, right?
Yeah, about 3 o'clock today, because it only comes out twice today.
I will manually move this on through. We have a little bit of a different color mapping here. Don't worry about that. What we are most interested in is that big L, that big yellow dot heading towards Florida, and you can see what the Europeans think. When you compare the earlier European run, Scotty, with the most recent GFS run, they're fairly similar. The question is whether or not the European forecasters think anything has changed when we get their update between 1 and 2 a.m. Eastern.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go a little technical for everybody, and I'll try to keep it in layman's terms. I'm gonna pull up this graph right here. This is kind of a take of the GFS, the European, and the European has a few other little models that they use, the Canadian, the NAM, and all these, and they kind of put it together. And this is a chart, and this tracks which model does the best. I want you to look for the ECMF. That's the European model, basically. And as you can see on every run, right here it is, right here, right here, right here, right here it is, then right here it is. The European model is tracking way better than any other model that is being used right now to check or to track Hurricane Irma. So if you was a betting person and you wanted to put money on which model was would be the best, or which model is going to predict the right landfall, you would have to go with the European, because this is actually I believe it even is beating here's the official track, and I haven't looked at everything, but just glancing at it, it's actually even beating the National Hurricane Center's forecast.
For a bunch of guys who really don't get hurricanes, they're really good at forecasting hurricanes, the Europeans.
You're exactly right. The European model, I like to call it in the weather world, and maybe one thing you may not know is we have a group chat here in the Carolina Weather Group that we talk at all times of the day and the night stuff. And I always say all all hail King Euro, because it seems like any big event, the European model is going to knock it out of the park. And once again, with Irma, that is what the European model is doing. So
and if you remember,
they have a good
Sandy,
system.
It was outstanding with Hurricane Sandy as well too. It had that path into New York City, into the coast of Jersey, long before the American model. And I don't mean to. I was trying to decide if I could curse. I don't mean to poop on the American model. The GFS, the NAM, they do good jobs too. But just like human beings have personalities and strengths and skills, and they may perform better in this arena than that arena, the Euro does pretty good with these Atlantic hurricanes. Is it perfect? No. If it was perfect, we could tell you where the storm was going to be 5 days from now. We can only give you a margin of error.
I will tell you this, though. Where the European does well on tropical storms, the GFS tends to do a little bit better on winter storms. So it's kind of a trade-off. So, I was just looking, I'm watching the stream here on my phone. It's a little delayed from what you guys are seeing. But if you have any questions for James or myself, please feel free to ask. We would love to answer those. And there's one thing that I did want to show that we haven't really talked about, and that's rainfall potential. And let me pull up that graphic that I've got for you guys. This is just for Western North Carolina again. But like James said, once you get around the Greensboro, Raleigh area, the impacts are going to be fairly low. So this is for the part of North Carolina that we expect to see the most impacts from Irma. A good 2 to 4 inches of rain is possible in the Greensboro, Winston-Salem, Charlotte, Mooresville, Statesville area. And then once you start to travel to the west, we call this the Catawba Valley, Taylorsville, Hickory, Valdez, down into the Shelby area, Forest City, we're looking at 3 to 5 inches of rain. Once you get into the foothills, places like Marion, Morganton, Lenoir, North Wilkesboro, up into the Mount Airy, Jefferson area, down into Polk County, down into Hendersonville, Asheville, we could see 4 to 6 inches of rain. And then we've highlighted these areas up in the mountains, up towards Avery County, Yancey, Mitchell counties, places like that, Watauga. We're going to see 5 to 8 inches of rain, and that's just because of that upslope flow that we talked about just a little earlier, about that extra moisture being wrung out over the mountains. That's where we expect to see the biggest potential of rain, higher rainfall amounts. And James, I'm going to stop sharing this screen, and I'm going to be looking up something. And what I want to show you is the flash flood guidance. So I've got to pull this up. It's in my bookmarks. So bear with me for just a second.
Sure. One of the things I can show while you're pulling that up, if you'd like, Scotty, is as folks are heading to bed, because I know we are seeing some folks sign off and head on into bed, and certainly understand it is starting to get later. I wanted to pull up the Miami radar. This is ground-based radar, National Weather Service from Miami. You know, it goes about 150, 200 miles out or so. And if you need any reason as you go to bed tonight to know that this event is drawing near and this is real, take a look. That is an outer band of Irma on radar about to come into portions of Miami, Key Largo, Marathon, and other portions of southern Florida.
Yeah, it is really, really starting to come in. I was watching the Weather Channel up above me, and they have started with their storm coverage, and it's showing those bands coming in. I'm trying to get this computer to work.
The computer is not cooperating as well either.
Let's see.
We will probably be wrapping things up here in the next few minutes, unless Scotty and I go and get some coffee and stay up for this European run, although it sounds like Scotty's got his alarm clock set. I will let you know that at 5 a.m. this morning, and I probably personally will not be up, 5 a.m. this morning is when the next National Hurricane Center forecast comes out with the really eligibility that the track could move. Well, at 2 a.m. we'll get a brief update, and they'll let us know what they think about other current conditions and landfall in Cuba. But at 5 a.m. is when we could see a slight tweak in that cone, and what that cone looks like at this hour, by the way, if you are just stumbling across us here, this is what that cone looks like at this hour, and it doesn't look all too changed from what we've been looking at throughout the day. The next update, 2 a.m., 5 a.m., 8 a.m., 11 a.m., and then those times repeat. So the times to remember, folks, are 2, 5, 8, and 11. In between that, the nerds of the world will be pulling in new information and ingesting it and interpreting it, and then that's what the official forecasters of the National Hurricane Center in Miami will be putting into that next update as they adjust their perception of what this storm will be doing. And as that storm does draw closer to the U.S. mainland, we, of course, will get more frequent updates from the Hurricane Center. With that, I think I've stalled enough for you, Scotty. I see you have your graphic up on the screen, and then we'll go ahead and pop you up here.
Yep, I have it up, and I was looking at the comments. Erica Wright wanting to know any chance that Irma still makes impact or landfall in Miami. That's certainly a chance, but that window of opportunity is really starting to close as Irma is still setting over Cuba right now. It actually looks like looking at the radar is really starting to dip to the south a little bit, interacting with Cuba a little bit more. But if it was going to affect Miami, it would have to start turning north about right now because, like James alluded to earlier, this is like a Big Mac truck. It just doesn't turn on a dime. It has to have a little help as it starts to turn, and it's not turning to the north. If anything, it's turning to the south a little bit. So Miami, not out of the woods yet, but I think definitely going to get impacts from it. But the eye wall itself may not affect Miami. But again, let's go back to the graphic that I had popped up. We'll talk about our coverage area, North and South Carolina. This is a flash flood guidance. This is provided to us from the National Weather Service, river forecast centers. They're able to help with rainfall, letting us know what the flash flood guidance would be. This is for 6-hour flash flood guidance. As you can see here in the western part of the state, we are looking at anywhere between 2.75 inches of rain to 3.5 inches of rain over a 6-hour time frame before we would see flash flooding. So, we're looking at maybe 4 to 6 inches of rain in some places, 3 to 5. So those definitely could be achieved. Let's go to the 3-hour guidance. And now if we was to get 2 inches or 2.5 inches of rain over 3 hours, we could see some flash flooding take place here in the foothills and the northwest Piedmont of North Carolina. That's something we'll have to watch. James, you live in the Charlotte area. You know it doesn't take a lot of rain to get flooding in the Charlotte area. So that's something we'll have to watch. Let's go down to South Carolina and look at their numbers. This is the 3-hour guidance. Again, around 3 inches of rain for the upstate. That's where we think Irma's impacts will be felt the most, besides on the coastal areas. The coastal areas will see their own fair share of rain, but those flash flood guidance not as high. But about 3 inches of rain over the upstate of South Carolina. And then as we go to the 6-hour time frame, no data showing up. So there you go. But again, as you can see, the flood concern is there because we do believe we'll be able to achieve those 4, 5, 6 inch rainfall totals, and that could create some flash flooding issues. So just again, something to watch. And James, as much as I know, places like Charlotte, places like Columbia, South Carolina, Greenville, South Carolina, those more urbanized areas where there's a lot of pavement and there's not really ground to allow the water to soak in, flash flooding could be a concern.
And where there isn't pavement in uptown Charlotte, it is those runoffs, it's those basins, it's those creeks that the city is built in and around and on. So those are going to begin to fill up. And while we may not see flooding like we're going to see in Florida, or we're going to see in places like Charleston and Savannah like we were showing you, I mean, we're still talking, I mean, let's pretend they're not river basins for a moment. Let's just pretend they're pipes, right? So we start sending water through a pipe. As you increase the faucet, you're trying to put more water down the same pipeline, and sooner or later you're going to start to reach capacity. And when we do typically see those flash flooding events in Charlotte, it is because those streams are beginning to get a little overwhelmed, and you'll watch the banks on the cameras start to come up a little bit. So as Scotty mentioned, as we watch for the possibility of some periods of long rain in Charlotte, whether it be tropical storm conditions or whatnot, we will watch for some of those localized flooding events to take place.
Yep, and we know, James, it seems like when hurricanes hit, or really any severe weather event besides tornadoes, it always seems like flash flooding is the one that creates the most injury to property and people, and even sometimes, people go through flooded roadways or are flooded so much that they lose their lives. So again, water is something that you don't want to mess with. You want to run from the water and hide from the wind. And just if there's a flooded roadway in your area or something like that, just find an alternate route. Don't drive through flooded water.
Turn around,
roadways.
Don't drown. And I'm looking at the Facebook comments over here, and Erica said she was caught in a flash flooding event in October of 2015, and she is agreeing, and as somebody who's seen it, agreeing with what we are talking about here, and that's why we will watch that very carefully. Again, a lot of that storm surge will be along the coast in Florida and along portions of the Georgia and South Carolina coast, but we will watch it closely as here too. And I'll share with everybody, because it's no secret to my boss if she comes across this for any particular reason. I was supposed to travel for business Sunday night, and when we were looking at that forecast 48 hours ago, when we were debating whether or not this storm is going to go to Raleigh or Charlotte after coming into Charleston, I said to her, time out, I can't go anyplace until we have some idea of where the storm is going, because if we were talking about a Category 1 or hurricane impact here into the Charlotte area, my backyard's a hill to my back door, and then my back door is only 6 inches off the ground. So after about 6 inches of rain, it doesn't drain very well either. We get a nice drizzle or summer thunderstorm, and my patio's got a nice thing of water on it. So the terrain here is hilly at times here in the foothills, and although, as we've been clearly talking about, that forecast cone is no longer looking at a direct impact into the Charlotte area or even to the North Carolina area, we're still talking about the greater outreach of the winds of that storm as we pop up the graphic for tropical storm force winds over the coming days, and of course the official forecast cone. We're talking about the eye of the storm, the center of the storm, most likely coming ashore somewhere between Fort Myers and Tampa in Florida, someplace late Sunday night, and then continuing almost like it's driving Interstate 75 into the state of Georgia. But as we were looking at satellite and looking at radar at this hour, I mean, this storm's hundreds of miles wide, and so even as the eye right now is making landfall in Cuba, we're seeing outer bands of wind and rain come into Florida.
We are. So I was just looking up at the Weather Channel while you were talking, and they were still showing many areas in Florida, people trying to evacuate, and the interstates are just at a standstill.
That's an excellent point. I could try to bring up some traffic cameras here for us in the next few minutes. I'm glad you brought that up. And
I will tell you. Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, James. But if you go to broadwave.com, this is what the Weather Channel is showing. They're showing a live stream right now of downtown Key West, and there is absolutely nobody there.
Good.
I mean, nobody. There is nothing stirring at all in Key West right now. So at least where this camera is located at, the people of Key West have decided to seek shelter at a place that's safer than where the Keys are right now.
I will look at some traffic cameras probably from Florida Department of Transportation in just a moment, but what I do have queued up on the screen and ready to go right now before I come away from it, this is a tweet that our friend Brad Panovich, a meteorologist here at NBC Charlotte, put out yesterday. Disclaimer, this data is from yesterday, but the point is the same. We are trying to figure out where Irma is going to be days from now, and we've been talking about how forecasting a hurricane is like trying to figure out what traffic patterns are going to be days in advance. And I think this graphic kind of helps show that, because what we're trying to figure out is not only where independent Irma might go after it comes ashore, is how the rest of the traffic, quote unquote, in the atmosphere is going to push and pull and steer Irma. And you can see this other low, this other shortwave that is supposed to come into Alabama, and the way Irma interacts with that. If that shortwave goes someplace else, Irma's path will adjust. That high pressure over the northeast, if that goes into a different place, Irma will adjust. So all these little things are going to push and pull and push and pull. It's like a game of tug of war, but we're trying to give you commentary on a game of tug of war 3 days before the players actually show up for tug of war. So it's very difficult to do, and that's why we take the expertise of these officials, these meteorologists, these forecasters who know the local area, who have seen historical data, but also know how to interpret a lot of the personality, quote unquote, of these forecast models, because different forecast models, as we talked about, are going to have different biases, different strengths, and different weaknesses. And when you know what each is good for, you can take all of those things, put them together, and make one big picture. And that is what the Hurricane Center does every few hours when they issue that official cone. One of the things that they use to issue that official cone is that raw data that I know Scotty is keeping a close eye on. We're watching that GFS, one of the American models, come in at this hour. We'll wait to see what the raw computer data looks like. Then we'll watch to see what the European raw computer data looks like, all leading up to that 5 a.m. advisory from the National Hurricane Center. And then the cycle just repeats itself. So, I mean, this is kind of almost like the Olympics of weather, because it is just non-stop here for several weeks.
That is a good way to explain it. There's when big storms move into the area, there's really no rest for the weary. It is just a non-stop, constant plethora of information coming in, and as a forecaster, you look at the models, but you don't really model hug. You have to think, well, what was it like the last time we had a hurricane here? What is it like when we had these steering currents before? And then you kind of get all that information, and that's how you make your forecast. So, it's a tough job, and I'll give kudos to the National Weather Service and the National Hurricane Center, the Weather Prediction Center. They have got their staff working 24/7 right now to make sure that everyone is alerted and ready for whatever is to come their way. So kudos to them. And James, one thing that we haven't talked about much is a lot of the forecasters from the Houston, Texas, and Galveston, and Corpus Christi, and Brownsville Weather Service offices are actually helping out folks who are here in the Southeast. And they just went through Harvey themselves. So there's a lot of cooperation that goes on in the Weather Service and help. And I know the National Hurricane Center, I don't know if you covered this before I hopped on, but the National Hurricane Center has actually sent about 4 or 5 of their staff members up to Washington, D.C. because of the threat of Irma making an impact in Miami, Florida, which is where the Hurricane Center is operated at, or maybe even the communication lines from the Hurricane Center go down because of the strong winds and stuff. So, they are here working for us tirelessly, in and out every day, helping bring this information so we can give it out to you guys. So, just a very busy time. And looking at the tropics, we have Jose and Katia out there. So not only are the Hurricane Center focusing on what Irma is going to do, they're also forecasting for Jose and Katia. And Jose right now, I believe, is on the cusp of being a Category 5, another strong hurricane. And that's something we're going to have to watch, a couple of days from now, maybe 5 to 7 days out, to see where Jose goes. There's some mixed signals by these models that we've been talking about. Does Jose go out to sea, or does it kind of just sit out there and meander around before another system may bring it closer to the coastline? That's something we're going to have to watch too.
Scotty, you mentioned this a few moments ago. Here is a live look at a interstate in downtown Miami. This is Interstate 95 near Southwest 26th Road, if you were familiar with the area. This is a still picture taken just moments ago and relayed to us from the Florida Department of Transportation. Scotty, what do you make that the roads are completely empty? I would like to say that that's good news because people are already gone.
Yeah, I think that's super. I mean, Miami, I'm not sure the statistics, but I would say it's probably one of the top 10 most populated cities in the country. I think that would be a fair assessment. And to see that there's nobody out on the streets is very encouraging, that hopefully folks have seeked shelter and have moved further north and are listening to the local officials who've asked them to move out. So that is good. I know that you're looking in the Tampa area.
I'm trying to pull us the Tampa camera so we can look at Interstate 75, because I am happy to see that that picture out of Miami was empty, because I think the people of Miami have known for quite some time now that they were going to be in the bullseye, but I think it's a little bit more questionable as you made your way further north. Right now I'm in the Tampa area, so I was trying to see if folks in this neck of the woods who maybe now are really getting the confirmation they may have been looking for of, yes, there is a hurricane coming this way and it is going to impact us, if we were seeing a little bit. Yeah, there we go. This is a lot of cars for 12:30 at night. 95 I'm sorry, this is 75 northbound in the Tampa area. I mean, I'm not a Florida traffic expert, but that seems like a lot of cars for 12:30 at night. So I'm glad that the traffic is moving and that people are getting out.
Yeah, I would say so. I'd say that's people probably evacuating right there. So, and Tampa is one of those locations that if we see this track go further to the west, Tampa Bay is in that danger zone, and maybe even seeing the center of Irma come across that area. So, I know if he was maybe to pull up a camera in Orlando, I hear traffic is pretty heavy there in the Orlando area.
Traffic is always heavy in Orlando. Have you been there?
That's true. It is. Yeah, I've been there a few times. It's always heavy.
Yeah, I'll pull it up.
The camera that is showing right now on the Weather Channel is the Florida-Georgia line. I would say that's probably Interstate 95.
When you asked for an Orlando camera, I was actually making my way into South Carolina, and I'll tell you why. Because South Carolina will give us video. Will give us real-time video, where some of these other states I'm relying a little bit more on still pictures, which I mean still tell a story, but moving pictures are always nice. All right, here comes Orlando, folks. That's a pole. I picked one with a pole in front of it.
Good job, James.
I'm sorry. That's black and white. That's really hard to see. There's traffic. I don't know if, again, I'm not a Florida traffic expert as we look at I-4 here, but I would say there's people out there. There's people out there. Let's make our way north to the Florida-Georgia line, not the band, but the actual Florida-Georgia line. Georgia is also not going to give us video. They will give us still pictures, but let's go right here to we got a warning here. What's the warning?
Yeah, and while you're doing that, Stuart Culpepper, traveling I-77 north, said it was packed with Florida plates today. Can't be many people left in Florida, and we're hoping that's true. We're hoping that the good people of Florida have seek shelter, and we welcome them here in the Carolinas. And who knows? One day we may need to be going down their way to avoid a storm.
I heard one of the governors today, and I want to say it was McMaster in South Carolina, but it could have been Cooper in North Carolina, saying exactly that. We are welcoming our neighbors in Georgia. We are welcoming our neighbors from Florida because, like Scotty just said, someday it may be them who are welcoming us onto their shores. Here's a camera, Interstate 95 in the Jacksonville area. Again, not as packed as it could be, and this far north, I hesitate to interpret what that could mean, whether everyone's already gone or whether or not they're not going. But either way, that is the picture, and I'll let you make your own interpretation of it, I suppose. The best camera I have in South Carolina, if I want to talk about Interstate 95, I don't have any cameras in Hilton Head, in Savannah. I have to go all the way up to the interchange with 26, 95, and 26. So this is
always busy.
This is but it's also that much further north from what we're talking about. But I mean, that's a steady stream of traffic. Interstate 95 here at exit 82 at that interchange for 95 and 26. So I do think that this picture probably is telling us, yes, people along the coast, Georgia, Florida. I mean, I can't see license plates from here, Scotty, obviously, but we do have a lot of people going north at 95 this hour.
Yeah, we do, and that's such a good thing to see. So we hope that that most of the folks are out, and whoever's there, we hope that they seek shelter. We got a report, Erica Wright, saying that Interstate 26 is packed. So,
let's take a look at that. I believe I have some cameras on Interstate 26, and we thank you for staying with Carolina Weather Group, your home for traffic and weather together every 10 minutes.
We're starting to go into the power outage thing.
I get made fun of around here because we were covering storms one night, and I just started reading off power outages. But I mean, Scotty, that's the situation we're going to be in on Monday or Tuesday. So here is 26, really about halfway to Columbia from the shoreline. We are looking westbound, and I would say a decent amount of traffic. I'm not sure where Erica is. Hopefully she is not driving and watching us. She is probably just listening to us on our Bluetooth in her car. So we thank her for that. Let's see if I can find a particular hotspot, but I would expect to see even more folks probably making this drive in the morning here.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this, our friend Shay Gibson, he and his family evacuated Charleston. Shay called me around lunchtime today and let me know that he and his family did get out, and they are evacuating actually up here into the North Carolina high country area, and they're going to enjoy their weekend here in the mountains, and hope that everything goes well in the Charleston area. I'm not sure about Jared. I know at one time Jared had told us that he may be going up to the Washington, D.C. area, but I'm not sure if he was he evacuated or not. So that's kind of report from our friends in South Carolina. David Elliott, one of my good friends, lives in the Chesterfield area and Lancaster area of South Carolina, and he was reporting that northbound 77 there in northern South Carolina had a lot of traffic as well. So.
And I am still trying to pull up these 26 cameras. Sometimes I'm just impatient and I won't give the DOT site time to load. But I'll do one more in the Charleston area of 26 here, as we again, we do have, as the governor mentioned, a few evacuations, a much smaller area than what was originally anticipated for coastal South Carolina, but there are a few, so we'll wait to see exactly how many folks here may be on the road at this hour, either because they were told to get out or have decided that they are just going to get out of town as it is. Good excuse for maybe a vacation. Here we go. Interstate 26. This is just outside of Charleston, and traffic's moving.
Not too bad.
Yeah. If you're watching and you want to get out of town, I think the lesson here, as we kind of just sampled some roads, is the roads are open, folks. So if you live in an area and you want to get out, nothing holding you back this hour.
Low-lying areas, especially in the Charleston, Savannah area, that's a good place to evacuate, because Charleston likes to flood at the drop of a hat, and sometimes we even flood the downtown areas. So that is a good place if you are in the Charleston area. Get out of there. You don't want to mess with the water, and by the time Tuesday rolls around, everything will be getting back to normal.
You know, it's interesting you just said that. I had this thought before, and you can tell me what you think of it. But when we look at the aftermath of Harvey, we look and predict what the aftermath of Irma is going to be. We know the broadcast networks have a special coming up already next week that is going to be a joint fundraising telethon for both of those efforts in terms of helping folks get back on their feet. I know there are a lot of folks in the Carolinas, myself included, who took the precautionary step of buying excess water, buying excess food. Hopefully we don't need it. But I think we can all then turn around and say, well, we don't need this. Let's donate it, because I think there's going to be a lot of people now in Florida, and let's not forget about the folks in Texas, who are still trying to get back on their feet. And I mean, store shelves have been out of water and bread from here in Charlotte to Miami now for days. And so I think that is something to be considered as we look to the days ahead. I don't know how all that stuff is necessarily going to get there, but as stuff starts to come back online, that might be an avenue. How are we looking on that GFS run that was in the midst of coming in, Scotty?
It is looking good. It would eventually on the Thursday. I can pull it up here.
I got it. Unless you want
you got it.
Show
no, if you got it.
There we go.
If you can see, we'll let it run through there. This is interesting right here. As you can see, it's kind of
starting to do the loop thing.
Yeah, lingers in northern Alabama, and then kind of comes back as the steering currents with another front take it back over the Carolinas at a much, much weaker state. But we could kick off some showers Wednesday evening into Thursday, so that we'll have to watch that. But steering currents take it out, and that's the last of Irma. As you can see, Jose out there looks like it may get picked up by that front as well and kind of pushed out. That's about as far as our model run will go right now.
Yeah,
but
Jose. There's Jose. There's Irma. And as we were talking about, as we get more of this GFS data, it's doing this little loop-de-loop thing and kind of just dissolving and then giving us more rain. Just wanted to point to the things that Scotty was narrating.
In which the models have really depicted that over the past couple of runs of Irma kind of getting over the northern Alabama, Tennessee area, kind of stalling out, looping around, and then the steering currents taking it back over the Carolinas before.
Well, if the steering currents want to break that apart, that sounds great, because then we can decrease that flooding threat a bit.
That's right. And then Jose out there wandering around, so we'll have to see that he's wandering there because there's really no steering currents to take him wherever
he's
it's
kind of
the
looping back down again, isn't he?
Yeah, and he's just hanging out there.
He's just
so
circling. You know what? If he wants to circle out there over the fish, that's fine. Just don't come this way.
That's right. It definitely, though, one of the impacts from that will be some higher surf along the East Coast, North, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida. So if you have maybe a late summer vacation planned to the coast, maybe next weekend or something like that, you may have to deal with some high surf and some rip currents. So as we kind of widen this down, I do want to mention, this is the peak of hurricane season. So we still have this threat at least for another 3-4 weeks. James, as you know, we've been doing this on the Carolina Weather Group. It seems like the last 2 Octobers we had to totally change up our schedule because of the 2 significant weather events that happened. 2015 with Joaquin off the coast of South Carolina, giving historic flooding in the South Carolina area, and then last year, obviously, with Hurricane Matthew. So we still run the chance of seeing some tropical activity in the Atlantic basin through September. Then once we get through mid-October, it kind of starts to go on the downswing. But again, between now and mid-October, the tropics are open, and right now is the prime time because the water is warm, and it's just asking for development. And I'll tell you this, there is a pocket of warm ocean water that has yet to been messed with, I guess is the best word to say here at 12:45 in the morning. Hurricane Harvey hit off the Texas coast. Looks like Irma is going to affect the southern part of Florida, but there's this pocket of warm water between the Mississippi, Alabama, Florida panhandle that has not been touched yet. And what I mean by that is when we get tropical systems with Irma, we get something called upwelling. So the storm is creating such turbulence in the ocean that it kind of brings that cooler water that's deeper down the surface, kind of brings it back up to the surface, and that's what we call upwelling. So if Shay was here, he would be able to show you guys on his weather flow maps that ocean temperatures actually cool off when a storm moves through. So the waters off Texas is cooler. The waters off of southern Florida will be cooler, but there's still this pocket of warm water in the Florida panhandle that if a system was to get going and was headed in that direction, it could intensify that. So we'll have to watch that as we go throughout the rest of the tropics. And again, we still have at least another month, James, of potential of seeing strong tropical storms. And talking about this, talking about the tropic, when's the last time that you can remember we've had 3 hurricanes of this significance? I mean, Katia is on the verge of becoming a major hurricane, Category 3. We have Irma, a Category 4, almost, or Category 5, back to a Category 5. We have Jose out there, who is almost a Category 5. We had Harvey out there that was a Category 4. It has been a rough period over the past 3 weeks of major hurricanes, and I guess the 2005 season would have been the last time that I can remember that we've had such a streak of major hurricanes, and some of those hurricanes affecting land.
I don't recall the last time we had 3. I've seen some comparisons. I want to say it was 10 years ago. People are talking about having 3 of them out there, and I can show it on a map here in a second. But the other map I have up, the other graph I have up that I want to show is exactly what you were just talking about. We are literally coming into the peak of hurricane season. September 10th, statistically, is when the Atlantic Basin fires up. So the fact that we have 3 of them out there right now is significant, but statistically is right on cue. And that's why the hurricane season runs from June through November. And when you think about some of those big storms that Scotty just mentioned, let's not forget, Sandy was a October storm. It snowed 2 weeks after Sandy in the New York area. And you can see that we do have, to repeat exactly what Scotty just said, several more weeks of this.
Yeah, so even once Irma and Harvey are kind of in the cleanup stages, that's something we're still going to have to watch for at least the next month or so, is the potential of seeing more tropical development. Not saying that something's going to develop, just saying that now is the time that we see that happen. And if history repeats itself, at least in the past couple of years, we may have something in the later part of September into early October.
Yeah, we do have right now the 5-day graphical tropical weather outlook.
Oh, look at that! There's your little area of interest off the African coast.
Yeah, well, and that's pretty typical for this time of year. And then you can see Katia and Irma and Jose, and then that yellowy patch is kind of a over the next 5 days we're watching for something out here. It's not likely to develop, but it is a tropical wave. It's a bunch of currents and thunderstorms coming off of Africa, where a lot of these things get their birth, their conception, and then they come our way. So that was the other thing, and I think Mike's weather page, spaghettymodels.com, has this. We have to also pay important attention, and again, this is just a statistics game, but the different months have different flows. And I'm going through all of the wonderful graphics right now on Mike's weather page to see if this is still up while we are in the brunt of the Irma discussion here. I will find it at some point, if not tonight, then on a future show. But essentially, the storm tracks that we're seeing right now are pretty on par with what you would expect in September. We're talking about storms that could impact Florida. We're talking about storms that could do this northern turn like Irma's supposed to be doing, and then we also have Katia who's doing her thing over in the Gulf. You might be saying, well, James, that's pretty much every possible path those storms could take, but there are different conception points, different paths that these storms will take, whether it is really an East Coast United States threat, whether it's really a Gulf threat. Harvey was only a few weeks ago, but we were in a pattern then where you really were expecting a lot of those to go into the Gulf, and so that is something to keep in mind too. But then we start getting into a statistics game, and I'm not a betting man, and I don't want to be making any major decisions based on statistics. As I apologize, I'm talking but looking over here. I'm looking at Mike's weather page. This is the monitor I'm looking at.
I'm reading. You and I are both part of this Facebook group, meteorologists in the state of North Carolina, and there's some interesting commentary going on about the eventual track of Hurricane Irma, and there's some good points brought up here about one person thinks that they don't totally buy the big shift to the west, saying if Irma remains over the Gulf waters, that it'll be strong enough that the upper level low wouldn't influence Irma as much, and that's a good point. That's something that I haven't thought about. Another person talking about the northeast shift of the GFS that we just watched come in itself. So, I still not the game's still not finished with Irma yet. We still got
we
time.
We can split straws all we want, but at the end of the day, that's why it's a forecast cone,
right?
And that's why when you look at this, we're still. The forecast cone is only slightly larger than the entire width of Florida right now. So we still have a margin of error because, we've been talking about it. Depending on exactly what happens, it could go a little bit this way, a little bit that way. But either way, we're talking about a forecast cone for the eye, and it's hundreds of miles wide. Florida's going to get hit, and then from there next. Yes, I'm sorry, Scotty.
Do you still have the satellite of Irma pulled up?
I not only have the satellite of Irma pulled up, but I have a hotkey for it.
I want to watch this because I've just seen some chatter on Twitter that it looks like Irma's eye may be starting to track north.
Let me do a hard refresh on that for you. Oh, there it is. And you know what? I popped up on the screen earlier. We were talking about something else, but I showed a tweet from Brad Penovich, and he talked about exactly that. Here is the tweet. Here is the credit to Brad Penovich. We talked about, we were talking about this before, steering currents and whatnot and the otherwise. And, there it is. So here's the satellite image. And forgive me, but I'm going to superimpose myself over it again because why not? So that I can point at exactly what we're talking about. But, Scotty, thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, and just looking at that, it seems like it kind of kissed the coast of Cuba, and now it's going north. It's
almost like, I'm fairly certain this didn't happen, but it's almost like it hit Cuba and bounced, That's what it looks like.
And can I tell you this, James? This is very interesting. If this is where she, or I say she, I don't think that. I don't think
his name is Irma.
Right. This is where Irma. If Irma starts to turn north here, that's interesting because this would be further. The turn north was supposed to happen somewhere over the Keys, and this is a good 100 miles west. 100 miles east of the Keys.
Okay, let's go into nowcasting, right? Let's go into nowcasting.
Well, this gets me a little excited because this may be why we saw that northeast jog in the GFS.
Yeah, let me do a hard refresh on the spaghetti models. And what I'm referring to when I say nowcasting is...
And let me tell you, Twitter is a buzz about this right now. Weather Twitter. If you're
right. If you're a sports fan and you follow a lot of football players, they're probably not a buzz about this right now. But
if you're a weather weenie like James and I, we call it weather Twitter. But Twitter is a buzz right now about this northern turn. And this could be a major wrench in the forecast because
is exactly what we were waiting for. This was the determining factor. Now, she could psych us out and in 10 minutes go west again. She could have just pulled off at a rest stop here on our Metaphor highway and is going to get back on in a second and go back the other way. But what I wanted to show, if I can find the button for it, is the spaghetti models. Because when we get into what we call nowcasting, is a term we use for real-time severe weather. So leading up to a severe weather event, there are going to be thunderstorms, there's going to be tornadoes. We have all these model runs, right? And then what we look for is, okay, it's going to start at this time, and as we grow closer to that moment, we start looking at radar, which is we know this is ground truth, this is what's happening, and we look at the models, and we say, okay, which model best represents the radar right now, because clearly that model had a best indication of what's going on. My point of saying all of that, as Scotty was just bringing up, is when we look at the models, which model called for the turn now? And it's hard to tell, but, I'm not an expert on the geography of Cuba. It does seem to me... Well, let me put these side by side. If this is the turn, is it happening early or is it happening pretty much right where we kind of thought it was going to happen and we're just verifying? Because there are the models, there's the satellite, and I can back that up a little bit too so we can kind of look at the geography a little bit better. We may just be splitting hairs here, although I don't want to take away from the significance that it is finally doing that turn.
Yeah, and this is what you were talking about. Could this be a wobble?
Yeah, it could just be a wobble.
Hurricanes wobble a lot.
The eye is getting smaller, right? So is it turning or is it just getting smaller and smushing?
But I do believe that this is a turn to the north. Is it maintaining? I'm not sure, but that's something we'll have to watch over the next hour, a couple of hours. But this is the turn. To me, and weather Twitter is a buzz about it right now. So
hashtag weather Twitter.
Yeah. So this is crazy. Let me see. This may bog my computer down. Let's see if we can pull up the Go 16 and tell.
Go 16, for those of you who are not on weather Twitter, is that big fancy satellite we talked about a few months ago. We talked about it here. We probably saw it on your local news as one of those satellite launches going up. This is a high resolution. This is like we launched an HD picture, HD camera into the sky, whereas before all of our satellites were standard def. Go 16 is like our HD camera. So as Scotty
4K,
tries to
4K.
Oh,
ultra.
okay. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to demean our satellites, our older satellites anymore. The so-called turn or wobble or whatever we want to call it is happening due south of the Bahamas. So as we look at the spaghetti models, yeah, that's debatably a little bit early, right? If you look at the Bahamas there. Because, like you were saying, it was almost supposed to turn just in time to hit Key West. Who was it on Facebook that asked about Miami earlier?
One of our followers did. Well, let's see.
Still too early to tell, but...
Yeah, too early to tell. But Erica was asking.
You need an earlier turn if we're talking about an eye landfall closer to Miami than Key West or Fort Myers.
Everybody must be on Go 16 because it is slower than molasses. Oh, here we go.
By the way, what time is the Euro come out? Have we stalled long enough now?
Well, not yet. It's another hour and a half or so.
Okay. I'm not going to make it.
No, I probably won't either.
Pace myself. I do want to remind folks, and I'm reminding myself this just as much as we come up to this 1 o'clock Eastern hour, that we're weather nerds. We get excited, but this is.
But there's
this is a
there's
serious weather event, and we're not talking about fantasy football here. As we are, is it turning? Is it not turning? I mean,
there's 25, 26 followers watching us right now. So,
well,
Go 16 is being extremely slow because everybody else had the idea that I had, I guess.
Well, I can give you a non-Go 16 picture, but I mean,
oh, maybe we got it. No, it's still being slow.
There may be a new frame here. I can't really tell anymore.
There's at least a north jog to that. Because
well, here's a scientific question. Did the GFS model that just came out include a turn at this point? And I think the answer is no.
I don't recall it.
But I do. I am walking. I'm walking back the excitement a little bit. I'm gonna just burst everyone's bubble because we're not sure. This could just be the eye doing this eye thing, and it's wobbling a little. You know, is the whole thing turning north? I don't want to call it on 6 frames.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm also going to guess that when you're
it's a wobble, at least a wobble.
It's it's definitely wobbling. I'm not questioning that, but I mean, it wobbled to the south an hour ago when you look at that loop. I mean, we can also play the game of whether or not did it make a landfall in Cuba or did it just scrape.
Yeah.
I mean, either way, I mean, it's
this is something to watch.
I think we're seeing a little feedback from the land.
Yeah, at least overnight, it's something to watch. So when you wake up in the morning,
Yes.
there may be a new track.
100% agreed. And I think, as we do probably wrap things up here at this 1 o'clock Eastern hour, that is exactly what I'm looking for each night before I go to bed is what in the morning do I need to check first? And I want to check exactly whether or not it's made this turn north yet. That was the last thing I saw before I went to bed because I am not going to sit here all night. You know, there are lots of talented people who are working really long shifts at the Hurricane Center doing that right now, and thank you to them. We will be back, by the way, with you, though, this weekend for updates just like we're doing now.
Yeah, James. You were talking about the bands. Our buddy Matt Reagan, you know, Matt, we've had Matt on the show a few times. He has tweeted out that the weather stem station at the University of Miami there in Florida has reported a wind gust of 59 miles an hour. So already tropical storm force winds from this first outer band moving into the Miami area.
Yeah, and I think you can see them there on that satellite picture, especially if I back it. I'm sorry, excuse me. If I back it back out a little bit, you can definitely see. But there you can see on the northern part of your screen, the tip of southern Florida, and those bands starting to work their way in. Scotty,
let's do one.
Go ahead.
Do one more hard reset of this satellite before we sign off.
All right, I was gonna even do one full recap of the 11 o'clock advisory. Here we go. I'm not sure that significantly. The eye is getting smaller.
Yeah, it's starting to interact with the. You can see the convection dissipating as well. It's really interacting with the land, and what it's doing is actually hurricanes like the ocean. They like water because out in the water there's no friction there. Once you have a hurricane interact with land, with trees, buildings, stuff like that, the wind flow, the airflow into that hurricane is not fully operational, and we start to see some decrease in strength. So it's interacting with, or it's getting some some things playing into it that is really cutting the strength of well, not really, but it's weakening probably a little bit as it interacts with the land and that friction with the storm. So, but something to watch there. It does. I mean, it had a wobble there, so we'll have to see if that wobble continues. Somebody made a great point on Weather Twitter just a minute ago. 12 years ago, I think tonight or something like that, Hurricane Wilma had a famous wobble. So it's something to watch here. So when we wake up in the morning, we'll have to see if that trend continues. If it is a northern move, move from right now, that really throws a wrench into it, because that would really change the forecast.
I hesitate to say really change the forecast. I think we're still within our margin of error. We just might see it move back to the east a little. I don't want to leave the impression that something major has changed here. I mean, it's a significant milestone, but
yes, but if that what we were watching was the northern turn, that would change some things up. That's something we'll have to watch overnight.
It would change some things. I think we're still within our margin of error. It would change some things. The other thing I'm going to check for in the morning is, did it turn north at this particular hour, or did it go back to the west a little bit? Because as you can see, this little interaction with land weakened it some. If it continues to go west and continues to play more with the terrain of Cuba, that's good news in terms of the strength of the storm, because as Scotty was saying, the more it interacts with Cuba, the more it's going to break down a little bit. But I think at the end of the day, whether it turns north now, whether it interacts more with the land of Cuba, I mean, we're talking about a major hurricane heading to Florida. No doubt about it.
That is true. All right, well, it's 1 o'clock. What do you say?
1 o'clock, I will leave everybody just with a quick rehash of the latest advisory we have from the National Hurricane Center, which did come out at this point now a whole 2 hours ago. We are due for another update in an hour. I would recommend that if you want to see that one, you check out Weather Twitter, which by the way is just Twitter with a bunch of other follows, just so you don't think there's actually a different Weather Twitter. But that 11 o'clock advisory, from the National Hurricane Center, does have Irma, Category 5 storm, moving west at 13 miles an hour, maximum sustained winds of 160 miles per hour, and was, as I recall, about 300 miles from the tip of Miami. She's obviously made some ground on that in the past 2 hours. The 11 o'clock forecast cone, here it is one more time for tonight. If she is in fact turning north right now, then she's probably further to the right of that forecast cone. And we will watch to see if at 5 a.m. that forecast cone ticks ever so slightly back to the right and back to the east. Either way, folks, if you're in Florida, if you're in the path of the storm, you've got a little bit more time to get out. This is when the winds will arrive. We're talking winds impacting already the southern area of Florida, but you'll really begin to notice them by morning, even for folks further up in Florida and into Georgia and the Carolinas. We will notice them over the coming days. It is a wind event. It is a rain event. It is a storm surge, devastating flooding event along the coast and along inner waterways. And as Scotty and I were talking about a little bit earlier, in the extended forecast for this storm, we're going to be watching for things like isolated flash flooding, power outages, and other impacts even as far inland as where we are here in the Carolinas. And so we do encourage you to stay with your local meteorologist, stay with your local management, and stay with us here at the Carolina Weather Group for updates on the storm over the weekend and into next week. And if nothing else, water doesn't go bad, food doesn't go bad, batteries don't go bad. Have that radio ready to go, have those supplies. All I can say to folks who have decided to stay in Florida, I truly wish the best for you, and I hope you have a good week's worth of supplies as you look ahead at this storm, because you have to weather the storm, and then you're going to have to weather the cleanup on the other side of it. Help will be there as soon as it can, but it won't be there right away. So we keep everyone in our thoughts and in our prayers. Any other closing thoughts from you, Scotty, here before we sign off on this early Saturday morning hour?
Yeah, definitely. Even though that, like James was saying, even though if you're not in the track, there's still going to be impacts in North Carolina and South Carolina. Coastal areas of South Carolina, watch out for the storm surge and some coastal flooding with heavy rains as you travel into the Piedmont of South Carolina and North Carolina into the mountains. Watch for heavy rain with flash flooding and some potentially damaging wind gusts. Thankfully, though, Irma will be a fairly fast mover in and out. So by Tuesday evening, we should have all of Irma behind us and start the cleanup process, whatever that may be. But again, my thoughts and prayers with the folks in Florida. And for those who evacuated, I hope that your homes and your property maintains in good shape. And for those who decided to ride it out, I wish the best of luck with them too. And, we'll learn from Irma, and hopefully whatever we learn from Irma, we can help apply to the next tropical system that affects us.
Thank you, Scotty, and thank you to everyone who has spent some time with us this evening. We thank you for trusting us with your information, and we will continue to keep you updated, and we will see you back here later on Saturday for continuing coverage of Hurricane Irma for the Carolina Weather Group. Have a good night.